owner's non-delegable duty, airworthiness inspection programs, and the rules that actually matter. Hello, this is Forrest Owens. I'm an aviation lawyer, private pilot, and an FAA licensed airframe and power plant mechanic. Now let's begin with the most important maintenance point in private aviation, because it is also the one owners most often misunderstand. Maintenance can be delegated in practice, but responsibility for airworthiness cannot be outsourced away. This is not a slogan. It's in the regulations under 14 C.F.R. section 91.403A. The owner or operator is primarily responsible for maintaining the aircraft in an airworthy condition, including compliance with Part 39 airworthiness directives. For large turbine aircraft, that language matters because sophisticated ownership structures often create potential dangerous illusions. The LLC owns the airplane, the manager coordinates the trips, the maintenance department talks to the service center, the crew writes up the squawks, but if the aircraft is not airworthy, the FAA does not treat that as an abstract paperwork failure. It treats it as the owner's problem. Here's something to remember. The airplane does not care who outsourced the work, and neither does the regulations. On large turbine aircraft, the maintenance baseline is also different from the annual inspection mindset many people associate with smaller airplanes. Section 91.409E says no person may operate a large airplane, turbojet multi-engine airplane, turbo propeller-powered multi-engine airplane, or turbine-powered rotocraft unless life-limited replacement times are complied with and the aircraft is inspected under one of the inspection programs allowed by Section 91.409F. And this is an important and fundamental point. These aircraft are not maintained intelligently by calendar reminders and optimism. They are maintained by a selected program, identified in the records, and administered with discipline. Section 91409F gives the owner or operator 4 paths. One is a continuous airworthiness inspection program currently used by Part 121 or qualifying Part 135 operators. One is an approved aircraft inspection program currently used under Part 135. One is the manufacturer's current inspection program, and one is another program established by the owner or operator and approved by the FAA. FAA Advisory Circular 91-90 explains how owner-specific approved inspection programs are developed and reviewed. So when a large turbine owner says, we just maintained it to manufacturer's recommendations, my first question is, which selected inspection programs or program identified where and administered by whom? A second misconception involves service bulletins. Owners often hear two simplistic statements. One camp says every manufacturer bulletin is mandatory. Another says service bulletins are just advisory and can be ignored. Both statements are wrong in the way that matters. The FAA explains in its service bulletins and the aircraft owner guidance that for Part 91 operators, a service bulletin is advisory unless it is incorporated into an airworthiness directive. But that doesn't make it irrelevant. Some service information becomes functionally critical because it addresses known failure modes, supports continued value, or ties into mandatory airworthiness limitations. That leads to the third point. Owners must understand the difference between service bulletins, airworthiness directives, and airworthiness limitations. Under 14 CFR Part 39, It establishes the legal framework for airworthiness directives. And Section 39.7 makes clear that anyone operating a product that does not meet an applicable AD is in violation of Section 91.403C. Separately, requires compliance with mandatory replacement times, inspection intervals, and related procedures in the airworthiness limitation sections, unless an approved alternative exists. In other words, on large turbine aircraft, you do not have one maintenance universe. You have a layered system. The selected inspection program, the mandatory AD universe, and mandatory airworthiness limitation universe. That layered system becomes very expensive when life-limited parts are not tracked correctly. Section 1.1 defines a life-limited part as a part with a mandatory replacement limit specified in a type design or instructions for continued airworthiness. And Section 43.10 governs the disposition of those parts. In turbine ownership, life status is money. It affects dispatch reliability, financing, insurance underwriting, and resale. A buyer can survive a cosmetic defect. A buyer cannot casually survive uncertainty over cycle-controlled turbine hardware, landing gear components, or engine LLP status. A fourth point is return to service after maintenance. Section 91.407 says that no person may operate an aircraft after maintenance, preventive maintenance, rebuilding, or alteration unless it has been approved for return to service by a person authorized under Section 43.7. And the required maintenance record entry has been made under Sections 43.9 and 43.11. If the maintenance may have appreciably changed the aircraft's flight characteristics or substantially affected its operation in flight, Section 91.407B requires an appropriately rated pilot to perform an operational flight check and log it, unless ground tests or inspections conclusively show that no such flight is required. A real-world example shows why this matters. In October 2025, the NTSB issued urgent recommendations involving certain Learjet models after preliminary findings pointed to a maintenance assembly issue in the landing gear trunnion pin and retaining bolt. The board said that the misassembly was not readily detectable during routine maintenance or pre-flight inspection and urged action affecting 1,883 airplanes in service. That is not an owner lesson, not just a mechanic lesson. Complex turbine aircraft require post-maintenance verification steps that are robust enough to catch the error that routine familiarity misses. That is why aircraft owners should be reminded, on a large turbine aircraft, maintenance is not a shop event. It's a government system. The first government question is whether the owner knows the aircraft's actual inspection program and who is responsible for scheduling it. The second is whether AD's airworthiness limitations and life-limited components are tracked in one coherent system. The third is whether the return to service process includes independent verification for high consequence work. And the fourth is whether the owner receives reporting that is meaningful enough to expose risk before the next trip, financing event, or sale process. In short, the first key maintenance consideration is understanding that large turbine ownership begins with a non-delegable regulatory duty. You must know the inspection program, know the mandatory items, know the life limits, and know who actually releases the aircraft back into service. Here's something for you to remember and take away. Keep this in mind. If you own a large turbine aircraft, maintenance is not overhead. It is the legal infrastructure of airworthiness. Thank you very much for your interest in this topic. This information is provided for informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal advice. Questions are always welcome. Please direct your questions to admin@aviationlegalcounsel.com. We look forward to helping you navigate these issues and answer your questions with precision.